What's happening, everybody? Excited to be here streaming again with you guys, talking about some pentatonics today. I'm in this really cool reverberant room, so playing pentatonics in here is kind of cool to hear how they line up with one another and then switching tonalities. So excited to be talking about them here with you. We're gonna go over a couple different resources today that we have with jazz lesson videos that have really helped me be able to play pentatonics better. These are all PDF books that Chad was writing when I was a student of his, before jazz lesson videos was even a thing. So I'm definitely a product of some of these products, right? And so we're gonna go over a couple different methods of being able to shed pentatonics, you know, in different ways and whatnot. So let's get into this now. So the first one we're gonna look at is these pentatonic phrases. These are set in different tonalities, right? And for me, I really like thinking about pentatonics based on an overall tonality of a song, right? We'll talk about how we can shift with them later, but really the goal for me with pentatonics is to be able to think about them as like the overall tonality of a song. So, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but if we talk about this over a blues or something like an F blues, I'll have one pentatonic that works over the entire F blues, and that's how I like to shed them. And then anything else that I shift to can go back and forth to and from that home scale, right? So we're gonna look at a couple different keys here. Let's go to the minor. Yeah, so here we got C minor. And we're gonna look at this small phrase here, just these two bars, this middle section. It's gonna sound like this. 1, 2, 3. So we're using our C minor pentatonic scale. Our minor pentatonic is C, E flat, F, G, B flat, and C. Those are our 5 notes of our pentatonic scale. Everything that I've practiced with pentatonics have always been related to minor pentatonics. Minor pentatonics and major pentatonics are actually the same scale, just starting on a different note. So a minor pentatonic is, like I said, 1 flat 3 4 5 flat 7 1. A major pentatonic is that same pentatonic starting on the on the 7th degree. So if I play, but then I start it on, I'm sorry, not the 7th degree. If I start on the minor third, sorry, E flat, that is the same thing as E flat major, relative major and minor keys. So I have my E flat major pentatonic that works and my C minor pentatonic. It's the same exact thing. So over C minor, if you know your major pentatonics first, that's cool. You can always just relate them in those minor thirds like that. I learned minor pentatonics first, so I always relate back to that scale. Same thing with when we talk about shifting and playing over dominant chords and playing over major chords. I just think about minor. And the tune that we're going to work on today is going to be Soft as the Morning Sunrise and Impressions. Both are in a minor key. So I think about it more as like the minor, the minor scale being the home scale. So minor pentatonic is my home for these scales here. So just that first bar and a half of that is a great way to practice hearing the tonality of these minor pentatonic scales, with the tonality of a chord. So if you can like practice that, 3 to 5 minutes a day, just that phrase repeating over and over again, it's a good way to hear what C minor pentatonic sounds like, right? That's like a good baseline. And then what I like to do from that is use these as launch pads to continue improvising with them in the tonality of C minor. So just that first 2 measures. And then I'll improvise for a little while and come back to the phrase. So I'm constantly moving back and forth with those, which I think is a really good, way of, hearing those tonalities and being able to get more flexible by having something you can read and have written down that sounds good and has the tonality of C minor, and then attach it with things that you can improvise with on the spot. They're like little entry points or launch pads of improvisation. In this book, 67 pentatonic phrases has 67 of them in different tonalities. So that's 67 launch pads, and we're only using half of one here, right? There's a lot of really great information. Also, I don't want to forget to mention the all the things that we're talking about today. There's a discount code in the description of this stream. If you go to jazzlessonvideos.com or click the link in the description, you can use PENTSTREAM5 and get $5 off your purchase, which is really great. So using that is good to get any of these books, at a little bit of a discount for you. So we're going to continue now and look at a different one of these to use as a launch pad and to connect them, right? And you can do the same thing with when you're learning transcriptions and whatnot. It's a good thing to be able to do here. So I'm going to look at the one now on the bottom. That's another phrase that I can launch into improvising. So now I'm looking at all of these phrases and I can start to connect them in my head without a backing track, without a set amount of phrase lengths in mind or numbers of phrases. I'm just improvising with these scales, really trying to get them in my head. I think it's a great thing to have set patterns. Like we talk about, there's another book in here called Pentatonic Patterns for Jazz Improvisation. That has set patterns, but I like to start practicing with improvising always in mind, right? So learning the scale and learning how to improvise with the scale at the same time is super important. And this is how I like to start my practice sessions when I'm learning a new scale or a new tonality, is to be able to start and thinking about improvising right away. So using these tonality phrases as those launch pads of improvisation and then being able to kind of move further with them. So we're going to come back to this exercise in a second, but I want to check out that book, Pentatonic Patterns for Jazz Improvisation here. So this is really similar. There's a lot of famous books out there that are famous in the jazz education world that I think this book is a great combination of all of those put together. But we're just going to look at a couple of these. Let me go to minor pentatonic just so we can kind of keep the theme going. Here we go. So I memorized these pentatonic patterns in skips and steps. So anything that is stepwise is moving in the same direction as the scale, right? So if we're thinking about C minor pentatonic, C to E flat to F, F to G, G to B flat, and B flat to C, that's stepwise. And then the descending version, C to B flat to G, G to F, F to E flat to C, all stepwise. Anything that is not that is a skip. So like C to F would be a skip, E flat to G, G to C, B flat to F, because we're skipping a note in the scale. That's a skip. And then uncommonly, you'll see double skips where you'll move from E flat up to B flat. So you're skipping F and G. You'll go C to G because you're skipping E flat and F. There's some bigger intervals that happen with those, but for the most part, you'll just see skips and steps. So in this book, I memorized these patterns in that skips and steps method and then apply the skips and steps to my new tonality or my new scale. So if I look at exercise number 2, right? I have C to E flat to F, F to C. So that's step up, skip down, because we're skipping E flat. And then the pattern repeats itself on the next chord tone or scale tone of minor pentatonic. So we start on the root, and we go to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, and so on. So it's easy to start to memorize these in those skips and steps and then be able to apply it to a new key without even really thinking about the intervals or the note names, right? So if you're starting to practice your minor pentatonics and getting to know them well, say if we go to A flat minor pentatonic, if I just apply that skips and steps method, that would be like step up, skip down. And I'm just going to do that now in A flat minor. Right? And then the descending version is those skips and steps just opposite. So we have step down, skip up. And another really great thing about pentatonics is that they're very versatile. And we're going to talk about what pentatonic shifting is in a second, but even from a diatonic standpoint. So you know how we talked about how C minor pentatonic and E flat major pentatonic are the same? Well, there's also a couple other functions for these. Any of the 5 notes that we have in our pentatonic scale can work over one of those 5 note named chords. So like C minor, obviously, E flat major, F7, definitely works over F7, and G, you know, G minor 7 flat 5, it can work over. G altered, it can work over. You can make that work. And then what was the other one? Oh, F. Oh, I just said F. Yeah, those are the 5. So using them in different contexts, you know, playing C minor pentatonic over a G7 chord has the sharp 9 and the flat 13. Kind of a cool sound, but it has the dominant 7th and the 4. So a little bit of a rub, but it's kind of a cool sound to play over. So you can experiment playing the, you know, verbatim diatonic minor pentatonic of C over those different kinds of chord changes. Works really well over F7, kind of a cool sound. So that's another function of these, is they have common tone relationships with a lot of other chords. So it's not just learning them, you know, C minor pentatonic over C minor. You know, there's definitely more functions for them as we go about. So learning these patterns, like I said, and being able to use them as launch pads, like the previous section that we just talked about, is great, but also just learning them in patterns across the horn with your fingers so you're a little bit more confident when you start to improvise with them, right? I remember, when I was studying with Chad, it was a lot of me getting assigned patterns like this that I would have to put in all 12 keys myself in full range of the horn. So like if I was playing C minor pentatonic, I would start on high F and just play the same pentatonic patterns, or start on low B flat. So if I'm doing, I do the whole full range, you know, then go on to the next key, you can do B, then B flat minor, then, you know, all those different kinds of scales. And it really helped me feel more versatile on the saxophone, but also so well versed in these minor pentatonics that I don't even really have to think about them. I just hear them, which is the goal, right? We want these to be as internalized as possible to hear them. That's why we're talking about all these different ways to practice them. You know, there's more than one way to get these pentatonics into our playing. We might as well use all of them to the best of our abilities. So these pentatonic patterns, try and do them full range if you can. And mixing and matching them is cool too. I like this pattern. We use those skips and steps. We have skip up, step down, skip up. Right? And then again, applying that to a different scale. If I go, let's say, to C sharp minor pentatonic. That's kind of a cool sound, and I'm just thinking about the skips and steps. Skip up, step down, skip up, step down, skip up, step down, and just applying that to my new scale, right? So patterns like these can be intimidating to look at and to read, especially like when you're reading them in all these different keys. It's good to look at it as one key, get the skips and steps into your head, and then be able to move on and you know, listen to it, hear it with your ears and just do the skips and steps by memory, kind of figuring out with your fingers and your ears, kind of letting your ears do the rest of the work. Cool. So let me just check on the chat here. Unfortunately, my OBS is not letting me see the chat, so let me just check it out here. With your ears and just do the skips and steps by memory. There we go. Okay, cool. Just want to check on the chat. Good. Okay, so continuing back with our 67 pentatonic phrases book. These are, like I said, launch pads, but when we start getting to this thing called pentatonic shifting, which all pentatonic shifting is taking multiple pentatonic scales and using them over a tonality that adds tension. So tunes like Soft Ways of Morning Sunrise or Impressions, which we're going to talk about today, those tunes are set in one tonality for a long time. Like Soft Ways of Morning Sunrise is in C minor for a really long time. Impressions is in D minor for a really long time. So having a home scale pentatonic that is always going to be in that key center and will always fit, and then experimenting with doing pentatonics on other sides of the harmony. Half step up, tritone up, major third down, half step down, all these different kind of techniques. And we practice them in the exact same way that we're practicing these diatonic patterns, right? In the skips and steps, and how to improvise them with these launch pads, right? So Another reason why these books are so great is you have all of the patterns written out in all 12 keys for you. So when you're learning how to pentatonic shift, you can look at one key and then shift to the other one back and forth, right? So if I'm looking at this C minor pattern, right? I can then, because I've practiced these, I can then move this to, let's say up a half step for now, C sharp minor. So I'll practice my, kind of in and out of time. For now, I'm just going to play it out of time. But I can practice going in and out of those two tonalities whenever I want, just using this pattern as a launch pad. Check it out. 1, 2, and I resolve in C sharp, right? So this is how you practice it in all these different kinds of ways. Improvising with them as always, I'm still, and I will still use like little alleyways of not written patterns to get myself in and out of those tonalities. I'm just using these as reference points, right? And you can combine them. Remember that other pattern we looked at before. So again, I'll kind of go back and forth reading those in this key of C, and then going up a half step to C sharp. And it's really fun to just practice these and make your own phrases up with the ones that we have in these books. I think PDF books are incredible resources, and they're a great way to teach you how to practice. When I was studying with Chad, that was a big thing that he talked about in my lessons was, showing me how to play things and how to practice, but it was really teaching me how to teach myself and teaching me how to practice more efficiently. And that's exactly what these books are and what Jazz Lesson Videos is all about. We want to be able to show you ways to be in the practice room by yourself and be as efficient as possible, as if we were sitting right there next to you playing. So that's the goal. These are all launch pads to improvising and launch pads to be able to play better with these pentatonics, right? So now we're talking about improvising with these. We're talking about pentatonic shifting, going through different tonalities. Let's now talk about how to play these over tunes, right? And that's another great resource that we have here. This one is called 30 Pentatonic Etudes on Jazz Standards. This one's great. Again, written by Chad, the master man himself. And what's cool about this book is that we have pentatonic etudes that are diatonic. So the ones we were talking about at the beginning of this, having like the home tonality scale, we have them written like that. And then we have a second etude right after that that is focusing on shifting. So focusing on going up a half step, focusing on going down a tritone, all these different etudes and pentatonics and whatnot. So let's look at this one over a blues first. So these pentatonics, there's one pentatonic scale I didn't talk about at the beginning, and that's dominant pentatonics. Dominant pentatonic scales are very similar to our major pentatonic. Our major pentatonic is spelled 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. In dominant pentatonics, it's 1, 2, 3, 5, flat 7, 1. So very similar, very similar, but one note different. We're using our dominant instead of our 6, major 6. Dominant 7 instead of major 6. So on C7 here, the first chord, or the first scale that we have here, we're using our dominant pentatonic scale. D, E, B flat, E, G, C, E. That's C dominant pentatonic. Dominant scale. And then when we go to G7, we're playing G7 dominant pentatonic, which is G, A, B, D, F, G. So that's getting us back to our home scale of G. And then over minor chords, we're playing minor pentatonic. And then over the half diminished chords, we're playing, fully diminished chords, we're playing like a diminished triad. Over that. And then everything else is diatonic to each one of those scales. So dominant pentatonics on dominant, minor pentatonics on minor chords. And there's no major chords in this blues. So we're good on that. So here, I'll just play this a little bit in time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Cool, right? So I know you can't hear the harmony. I still haven't figured out the iReal Pro like syncing up with me, so you know I can't play it in time anyway, so it would sound really weird. But anyway, being able to hear those pentatonic scales, especially when you play it with a backing track, or you know by ourselves, we should maybe be able to hear what a blues sounds like, you know, just in our heads after. But just hearing how those intervallic lines still line up exactly with the changes. It's really cool. Pentatonics have this really modern, you know, large interval sound, very intervallic sound, but it's completely diatonic. I remember when I was, you know, checking out a lot of Chris Potter when I was younger and stuff. He's a mastermind at being able to play intervallic phrases super down the middle and in the tonality, but because the phrases themselves are so technically proficient and you know, large intervals and pentatonic, like it doesn't even sound like it's inside of the key. It's kind of funny how our ear latches onto the line sometimes more than it latches on to the chords. And I think that's the whole reason why we can play sharp nines on dominant chords, and we can play sharp 11s on major chords, and we can play, you know, all these notes, because the melody on top of the chord changes is much more important than the actual chord. So, you know, a little bit off topic as to what we're talking about with pentatonics, but still a really good thing to remember is that no matter what you're playing on top, if you play it with conviction and confidence, it can really help you get better at playing some, you know, alternate tonalities on top of the changes and whatnot. So thinking about that as we're practicing these pentatonics is a good idea. So another example of using these as launch pads, and this is exactly what I did when I was studying with Chad, is he would give me etudes like this as an assignment to learn, and then I would take them in my practice time as ways of giving myself ideas to then improvise with. So for example, if we take this line, the 2-5 going to the 4 chord, so I'm here in measure 4. I started here and then I resolved to that B flat. What I do is I'll play a blues, and every single time I get to that measure, I'm going to play that pentatonic lick. Everything else is just going to be me improvising with my own pentatonic scales. 1, 2, 1, So I use them as ways to improvise, right? I'm using that exact line as an aiming point and a launch pad at the same time. I'm aiming for that line when I get there, when I'm before, you know, playing before it, and then I use it as a launch pad to keep going into my own improvising. And that's why these etudes and the pentatonic phrases are really great ways to teach us how to get more comfortable with improvising with these, right? So this is like step number 3 in the process, is being able to see how they work over progressions rather than just one tonality, and then you being able to make your own examples of them, just like we were doing with the pentatonic phrases book too. So now let's look at the pentatonic shifting etude here. So this etude is meant to be using some of these alternate pentatonics, up a half step, up a whole step, up a tritone, you know, all these different kinds of things over the same progression of a blues. So we have some inside pentatonics to give us context as to what we're playing, and then over certain parts where like we're playing like 2 5s back to 1 or 3 6 2 5s, that's when we're going to use our pentatonics. Whew, excuse me. So, for example, here on G7, well really this whole progression G7, D minor, G7 to C, we're using these to be able to use some tension points that are not in G7 and not in D minor to then like use them in order to get us to C7 in a different way, a non-diatonic way, a chromatically voice-led way, excuse me. So check it out. So all those notes in G sharp minor have tension points on those 2 chords. D sharp or E flat is the flat 13, F sharp is the major 7, G sharp is the sharp 9, F sharp, and then leads us to G on our C7 chord. Kind of a cool sound, right? I really like that a lot. And then same thing with our 2-5 here, F minor, D sharp minor, G sharp minor. And that's a really great phrase to get us back to G, right? Because that's super inside of the tonality, right? So everything before that, kind of a cool way of playing outside of the tonality and inside of the tonality, like resolving back, right? So again, you rinse and repeat the same process with this as we were doing with the other two exercises with pentatonic phrases and with the patterns, right? Play the etude, maybe a chorus of it, and then improvise with a couple of the ideas in mind. So what I'm gonna do is those 2 licks that I just played for you guys separately, I will play during the blues. Everything else will be improvised, right? 1, 2, 2, So again, shifting inside and outside of the tonality, being able to play minor pentatonics, dominant pentatonics inside, and then those entry points that Chad has written here, those are my points that I'm really shedding. So keeping something that always I'm aiming for in the same, in this case being those G sharp, A minor, G sharp, and then everything else being my improvising that I'm using, you know, with pentatonics. So that's what these books are so great for, is they're really teaching you how to eventually make your own versions of the etude themselves with our improvising, which is really cool. Okay, cool, let me check on the chat again. Make sure we don't have any questions here. These books are so... Oh, someone said hello. How's it going? Thanks for joining. Cool. So I want to talk about some of these. Yeah, here we go. This is the solo I want to check out. So we're just going to listen through a little bit of this solo of John Coltrane's, and he's kind of like the, in my opinion, the #1 guy to check out for all of these pentatonic, you know, language things. He's like the, in my opinion, he's the first guy to like put this on the jazz mainstream, you know, as far as the kind of pentatonics that we're talking about, pentatonic shifting and all that stuff. So we're just gonna check out a little bit of the solo. We're gonna talk about pentatonics, how to analyze them, and then how to practice, because this is a big part of this language, is listening to it and how people phrase it. So let's check this out. So that pentatonic that he's continuing to repeat, the starting on B, that is the E minor 6 pentatonic. So it's our E minor scale with a C sharp instead of a D. So that's E, G, A, B, D, E. So he repeats that a lot. That is what I consider his home pentatonic for impressions. So we were talking about how things can shift back and forth from a home pentatonic. That is his home pentatonic for this. So now if we count these notes, we have C, D, G, F, and B flat. So that would be kind of like a C dominant pentatonic scale without an E natural. So similar, but we have a D natural instead of an E. So C, D, F, G, and B flat. Almost like a G minor pentatonic over this F7. No A flats, which is kind of cool, no third, and no 7, right? There's no E flat in here either. Kind of an interesting sound, but cool with those wide intervals. So here, adding a D sharp and a C natural, those are two notes that would be outside of our E minor tonality, right? To me, that's almost like he's playing E flat minor pentatonic. And then here from B, he's like playing whole tone. B, C sharp, D sharp, G, B, C sharp, D sharp. That's like that whole tone tonality. It's like a whole tone pentatonic without an F natural. So you can make the whole tone scale, pentatonic scale, just by taking out one note, right? And in this case, he's taking out F natural, because that would clash a lot more, that half step away, excuse me, with E minor. So that's a cool scale to be able to play, you know, on these outside pentatonics. And what's interesting is you can keep, or not interesting, but what's cool about this is you can use those same skips and steps patterns we were looking at here with this book, but now use the whole tone pentatonic, right? Just apply the same thing. So if I'm gonna say I'll start out on G. So I'm gonna do step up, skip down. Actually, I'll start on E flat, that'll be easier. So step up, step up, step down, or skip down. Right? So you can play these same patterns now with the whole tone pentatonic. Kind of a cool concept, just taking and rinsing and repeating the process with the same book, right? Really cool. Let's keep going on this. So even though he's playing 3 notes, I still consider that E minor 6 pentatonic. Right? So even though he's hopping around, still the same notes of that minor pentatonic scale. That's his home pentatonic. this play because a big part of practicing for me is active listening and active transcribing, like, you know, or watching, I guess, in this case. But I used to, and I still do this a lot, but like just listening to certain parts of his lines and seeing how they look on the page and what their intervals are like, and then just trying to imitate. There was one that I was going to talk about. Hold on. I think it might be further back here. Oh yeah, here we go. So when the bass goes out, and it's just drums and sax, this rhythm. I love that. It swings really hard. It's a cool intervallic, very saxophonistic line, right? And for me, I like to use that as a, I know I keep using the word launch pad, but as a way to start a solo, as a way to continue the forward momentum of a solo. I think it's a great way of being able to rhythmically add tension in this case, right? And forward momentum. And it's not even about the notes. Like, you know, he's playing a G sharp, you know, on this E minor chord, but still in that same tonality, the E minor 6 pentatonic minus that note. It almost sounds like that note was maybe a little bit of a blip. He meant to play a G natural instead of a G, but still. And then I just like to start soloing after that. So I'll use that as like my E minor 6 pentatonic lick number, you know, whatever. You know, I just use that as a launch pad, and I'm only thinking about one scale, just one minor pentatonic scale. And as you can see in this this transcription, he goes back to the minor 6 pentatonic so much, and he's so creative with just those 5 notes, you know? So just a quick recap on what we've gone over today. How to play these pentatonic patterns with skips and steps from our Pentatonic Patterns for Jazz Improvisation book. 67 pentatonic phrases, using these phrases to see where they are tonally and then improvising with them and using them as launch pads to create our own improvising, and then also being able to read them in the context of the tune, right, and the chord progressions of a song that then fits improvisation, you know, kind of with progressions, I should say, inside and outside of the key. And then using these the same way that we use those first patterns in the 67 pentatonics phrases book as launch pads of being able to write our own etudes. So it's like a 3-step process of being able to implement these. At least that's how myself and Chad has taught this to me back in the day. Practicing them patterns all over the horn, practicing the pentatonic phrases, you know, with a tonality, and then being able to use them over a song and experimenting around with using different ones. And the pentatonic shifting method, I'll leave you guys with this. The pentatonic shifting method is great when you play it up a half step, up a minor third, down a major third, and up a tritone. Those are my 4 favorites. And, you know, there's not really a science behind how to practice those. But for me, I really like the way that you can add tension on progressions that lead to a new tonality. Or in in impressions, the way that you use them coming in and out of your home pentatonic. Like that's your 1 chord, right? So the minor 6 pentatonic for Coltrane, and then going back and forth between those. And in the context of a blues, using the you know, the up a half step, the shifting part, as the way that we use them on progressions that lead us to like the 4 chord, that lead us the 3, 6, 2, 5 back to the 1 chord that we have written here, are the most effective ways, especially to use them starting off the bat when improvising. The other ways, you know, like playing them on the 1 chord of the blues or whatever, there's a little bit more advanced. I think you'll find a little bit easier right off the bat to just start playing them on the progressions that lead you to a new tonality, so your ears can hear how it resolves in a progression like that. But, you know, there's no wrong way of doing it, and luckily these books have them all laid out for you, so it's a really positive experience here. So, hope you got some good, you know, things to practice with these pentatonic books. If you want to dive deeper, definitely check out the pentatonic books in the description below and use the code PENTSTREAM5 for $5 off any of these books on jazzlessonvideos.com. Boom. And I'll be doing these streams every week, so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you